Welcome to another edition of the Five Star Zone. I'm your host, Rico Beer, joined today by Harold Shelton from the BTN. He's a senior research manager. Harold, I think we found out last weekend, it appears to be Ohio State and Oregon and everybody else. And in that game, it was entertaining. It was, we were texting during the game. It was fun. It's what college football is about. And I like the fact that because of the playoff system, one of these teams didn't get eliminated. We could see this game again in the Big Ten championship game. Heck, I wouldn't mind seeing it kind of how Oregon and Washington played a bunch last year. I want to see this game again because it went back and forth. It showed me that neither team was totally dominant. They exposed weaknesses on the other teams. But in the end, it was maybe some showmanship by Oregon, putting 12 men out on the field, knowing the rules. Ohio State was kind of discombobulated, and before you know it, the clock was ticking, and nobody wanted to use that final timeout. You know, Howard slides, and the game's over. And he's looking like you could see the disgust on his face, like, wait, that's not fair. But, you know, it worked. Now, if I'm Dan Lanning, I'm probably not letting people know what I did. Okay? There's certain things you keep to yourself. You just don't. You got away with murder. You then don't write a book about it, and then wonder why is everybody coming after me. But man, I look at this game. I look at this Oregon team. I look at this Ohio State team, and I see two of the better teams in the nation in a year that there's no dominant teams. I think it's those two in Texas and everybody else.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. And, you know, I think if both teams win out, we'll see this matchup again because Ohio State still plays Penn State and Indiana. So if you beat both of them, you know, you get them a loss and they'll be behind you. And, you know, I could see them running it the rest of the way. And hopefully we get to see that again in December. Because like you said, I mean, 7 lead changes was back and forth. You know, when the schedule came out, everybody was wondering, all right, when does Ohio State play Oregon? We've been building up to it for months, and it lived up to the hype. You know, it completely did. You know, we saw a bunch of big plays, both sides, stars making a ton of plays. You had a fight. You know, don't necessarily agree with spitting on a guy and getting thrown out the game, but like, you know, you had that kind of tension in the game.
You know what? Hold on, let me backtrack. That was the dumbest person on the field. Okay,
there we go. Fair enough. You're right about that. And it's like, dude, you're killing your team. Like that could have been a touchdown and resulted in a field goal. It could have potentially cost you the game in a 1-point game where it was going back and forth like that. You had to settle for 3 instead of 7. But yeah, I mean, this game had it all. And I was wondering if Dan Lanning did that 12 man on the field on purpose, and he did admit it yesterday. That it was something that they work on. Like he has a bunch of special situations that they do, and you know, you never know when something's going to come up. But it was something that they had, and I think Jabbar Muhammad was the guy who knocked the ball away on that particular play, and they had safety help over the top. So it was one of those like, hey, we'll let you use, you know, more time. We'll just make sure you don't complete the pass because we care more about the time than the yards right now. And so it worked out perfectly for them.
I mean, when you look at Oregon, man, there was a lot of missed opportunities for this Oregon Duck team. I guess if you're Oregon, you got to clean that up. I mean, for somebody like all of a sudden their kicking game, which I thought was very stable, isn't anymore. You got a lot of options if you're Oregon. Do you just start, you know, going for 2 and going for it, almost a little Dan Campbell Detroit Lions, and just using all of that offense that you have, knowing people can't match up with you? You know, you got the players that you can move and shift around, and I don't understand sometimes why he's so conservative.
Yeah, it's weird because there are times, especially in games past, where they'll score first and then they'll try to go for 2 early, just to, you know, get up 8-0, and then it's like, okay, we'll cause the other team to try to chase us, and then we can kind of control the game on their terms. I was surprised that he didn't do it after this one. Maybe he thought that, you know, points might be at somewhat of a premium. I can't afford to lose a point here. But then you wind up doing it anyway because you have a bad snap on the extra point, and then you chase right after that and don't get it. So then you gave away 2 points there. Then, like you said, they missed the field goal later on. And so to your point about the mistakes, if you take away, I mean, missed field goals 3, the extra points 4, the 2 point, I mean, that's 5 points that they gave away, not counting the Trayshawn Holden play, which could have been 7 and wound up being 3. So, I definitely thought Oregon was the better team throughout based off of those mistakes, because that was an extra minimum 5 points and could have been closer to 9 that they left on the field.
And then I look at Ohio State and I'm like, well, okay, it looked like they were taking advantage, because I said whoever had the ball last was going to probably win, and they were setting themselves up for that situation. I mean, when you look at that final series, who's to blame for the fact that Ohio State didn't get a score, didn't get a field goal off? Who's to blame for that? Is it Howard? Is it Ryan Day? Is it Chip Kelly? Who is to take the blame for this?
I think it's a collective, and that might be a cop-out answer, but I think there was a lot of issues all around there. Will Howard, taking the sack early, he just basically just falls down when the first player to drive. Now, granted, they wound up getting the first down after that, but I thought the Jeremiah Smith offensive pass interference was a little dicey considering how physical that game was. But I think right after that, them not realizing that the time was still going and you had a timeout and you let so much time go off the clock that it pretty much limited your window of plays. And the way that they were moving the ball, if they call a timeout right after that penalty's called, they're left with, at least another 15 to 20 seconds. And so then if Howard can slide down, they go up and spike it. Now you got a chance to kick a field goal, or maybe even run another play. You run another out, get another 10 yards to Abuka or Smith, and then you're really cooking with a very makeable field goal. So, I thought Will Howard, not knowing the time and the slide was an issue. I thought the clock management there from Ryan Day was also a problem. And then, the Jeremiah Smith play, I don't think should have been a penalty either.
Yeah, I think what you saw there was a freshman. He didn't get the freshman call. He didn't know. I guess in theory, you can't give the full extension because, yes, that's a penalty. I like the kid, but you can't extend your arms like that, especially out there when it's just you and a guy. It got picked up. I look at this Ohio State team, and it's got to be frustrating because, you came out and said that, hey, we spent a whole lot of money on this, and you went to the West Coast where a lot of teams just didn't do well on the West Coast. I guess unless you play in the city of Los Angeles, that's the exception, it seems like. UCLA's lost twice. USC has lost once. But if you're Ohio State and you're Ryan Day, you got to be scratching your head. A lot of people are angry and upset saying Ryan Day can't win, against top 5 teams. I'm going to hit the pause button on that. And I know I'm going to give you an unpopular opinion, not to you, but to a lot of people out here watching and listening. I don't count that because I look at the fact that, like it or not, Michigan cheated. Ryan Day got, he didn't win games because they knew the plays. So I'm not counting this record of Ryan Day. I know it looks salacious on social media. Oh, he can. Ryan Day is fine. Ryan Day is also the same coach that was probably about to win the national title had Marvin Harrison Jr. not got knocked out the game. He was beating that Georgia team that went on to win it all. They were manhandling that team. So I said that to say I think that Ohio State's going to be okay. I'm looking forward to this rematch, and I think that they're better than Indiana. I think that Indiana's a nice team, but when you look at who they've been playing, not a lot of world beaters. They're that. There's a lot of teams out there, Harold, that I don't know because they haven't played anybody. Their record says they're good, but are they good? I look at I thought Illinois was good until they showed me they weren't good. I don't know, but I do know this Ohio State team is good. Penn State, on the other hand, I guess the Penn State USC game was the JV game to the Ohio State Oregon game. Except for in Ohio State Oregon, it seemed like both teams were trying to win. Penn State USC was like both teams were trying to lose the game. It didn't seem like either team really wanted the game. I mean, James Franklin and Lincoln Riley might as well just play rock, paper, scissors at the 50-yard line to see who was going to win. Look, I know I didn't put it on the sheet, but look, USC, this team could be good if they could string together 2 consecutive halves, but they can't. Normally, it's been first half bad, second half good. This time, it was first half great, and then you didn't show up in the second half. You scored 10 points. You're up 20-6 at home against Penn State. You got your crowd behind you. Everybody's out there having fun. How did they blow this game?
I thought their game plan early on was great. They actually decided to run the ball, which they should do more because I think Woody Marks is a really good player. But I think Lincoln Riley kind of gets into this habit of, I got this quarterback and these receivers, and I like to throw it around. And when Penn State was making their comeback, when USC had the ball, there was some short possessions there. There was, some 3-and-outs. And it's like, dude, you've been running the ball well. Like you ran it, like 45% of the time in the first half, and then that dropped into the 30s in the second half, and you never trailed. Like that shouldn't be the case. Like you shouldn't have had to rely on just throwing the ball around.
Right.
And for whatever reason, it seems like he gets in this mode where it's like, oh, well, I got Miller Moss and I got this great receiver room, and so I got to throw it, even though your offensive line isn't great pass blocking. Like you give up a ton of pressure to the quarterback a lot. Why not run the ball more? So I was confused by that. And then they gave up the 2 touchdowns for it to be tied. And then USC responded with a touchdown. I'm like, okay, well, maybe they'll pull this out. Then you let Penn State convert twice on 4th down, come all the way down the field and score it. You throw a pick in the last minute of the game with a chance to get a game-winning field goal. You get the OT. You miss the field goal there. And it just seems like USC, for whatever reason, just can't win these games. I mean, that's 3 losses by 13 points this year. You've had a lead in the 4th quarter in all of them, and you just can't close the deal. And, Lincoln Riley's only, 5-8 his last 13 games. And it's like, dude, like it's USC. I'm not, I don't live in LA, so I can't, say what's being said out there, but I got to imagine the program with that much prestige isn't happy with 5-8, considering how much they shelled out to get him.
Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe they don't care. You got the Dodgers in the playoffs, Lakers getting ready to, preseason's going on. Maybe they just don't, but I look at this, that's one coach, man. I just believe that Lincoln Riley's been handed so many toys and advantages, and he gets the benefit of the doubt, but he does not win games. Like, but I think I saw some stat, and you the stat guy, but like over the last 20 games, he's barely got like a 500 record. Like it's not good. Like he finds ways to just lose games, and it's not like you're losing to better teams. You should have beat Michigan, you should have beat Minnesota, and you should have beat Penn State. You should be undefeated right now. They should be a top 3 team, and instead. Now you struggling to see what kind of really lesser bowl. You're not going to the playoffs because, you still got Notre Dame on the schedule. You still got other games that you're probably going to end up losing. So I look at that. But, I mean, with James Franklin, I think that this sets up well. It's the showdown against Ohio State. And we'll see, how good this team is. I don't think that I look at the team. I like their running attack with Singleton and Allen. I don't know if that's enough. Now, the Ohio State defense and Ohio State's I think the difference with Ohio State in the previous years is they always had the dominant O-line and a dominant D-line. They don't have that. They got players, but they used to have a unit where it was just like, oh, my God. I mean, I remember, the back in the day when Nick Bosa goes out and, all right, well, let's put this freshman in, this redshirt freshman. Who's that? Oh, it's Chase Young. And he just goes on to be Defensive Player of the Year. You don't have that anymore. It's going to be a fun game to watch when that game comes up, Ohio State, Penn State. I don't know. Penn State, to me, I don't know if they're the 3rd best team in the nation. I got to wait and see on that. That's just me because James Franklin, Lincoln Riley, and Lane Kiffin, I always say they find ways to disappoint you. Every time you want to believe in them, it's like Lucy in the football with Charlie Brown. She pulls it away. Those three pull it away each and every time. I felt dirty betting on Penn State, but I actually won. But I just felt dirty doing it because I knew, okay, one of these two going to screw it up. All right. Now, let's fast forward to this upcoming weekend, do a little preview. Let's talk about the two local teams here in the state of Michigan. Michigan State, you're going to be playing a primetime game, homecoming against Iowa. You know, a week ago, it looked like this could be a coin flip game, but then Iowa just destroyed Washington. And Washington coming off the high of beating Michigan. It was a game for about 10 minutes, and then it wasn't. Then it turned into the Caleb Johnson show. Ohio State stopped him. I just got finished saying Ohio State's D-line wasn't that great, but they're the only team that held them to under 100 yards. Is it simply MSU, you got to stop Johnson, and you got to keep Aiden Childs from turning the ball over, and you got a chance? Or is this just Iowa's defense along with the running game is just going to be too much for the Spartans?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head with that. It's pretty much Caleb Johnson, and if you can stop him, you know, obviously good luck trying to do that. But if you can stop him, I certainly think you're in the game. He's been responsible for over 46% of Iowa's scrimmage yards, which is by far most in the country for any individual player. Just goes to show you, like, Iowa's offense literally can't move the ball if Caleb Johnson isn't involved. Like, Cade McNamara, you know, threw a touchdown pass last week, and it was his first touchdown pass against a Power 5 team since he played at Michigan.
Wow.
He last played there in 2021. So, like, that's the kind of stuff that Iowa's offense has been dealing with. I know he's had some injuries and stuff like that, but, you know, they played Iowa State multiple times. Like, he's played Penn State. Like, he played the first half against Michigan State last year. And, like, he wasn't throwing touchdown passes. It was literally just, all right, we'll try to run the ball, play defense. But now he really doesn't have to do much. Just don't turn the ball over. And obviously against Ohio State, he did. But in the other games, he's been better with it. And I think that's why Iowa's been able to score, you know, 30 points, 40 points like they did against Minnesota and Washington, because they've been able to run the ball. You know, Caleb Johnson's been that great. I will say Iowa's defense has holes that we haven't seen, especially in the secondary. Now, we know they'll turn you over. We know Aiden Childs likes to give the ball away. But there have been big plays. Yeah, right. I've seen it a couple times. But Iowa's defense, like, in terms of big plays, like last year, they only gave up 6 plays of 20 yards in the first 6 games. They gave up 18 this year. So, like, plays can be made against them. You know, we saw Washington go down the field. We've seen, you know, Iowa State hit them with a couple big plays in the loss. We saw Ohio State go crazy on them. The thing is, you got to score on those plays because they want you to, you know, dink and dunk down the field, and eventually you'll screw it up and we'll get a turnover and then we'll get off the field. So I think the big thing is, I think Nick Marsh, Jerron Glover, guys like that will be open, but if Childs makes that throw, they got to score on it, because at a certain point, the longer that drive goes, the more opportunity it is for them to take the ball away.
Yeah, I would say they got to score on it too, because Michigan State in the red zone is just, hey, how can we turn the ball over? It's going to be a fumble. It's going to be an interception. It's going to be a turnover on downs.
We saw it in the Oregon game. They get to the 2, next play, fumble in the end zone. Like, they got to score on that play.
Yeah, I mean, because at this point, I'm like, man, just do the tush push for 4 downs if you're on the 2. You know what the play is? We're just going to keep going. Hopefully these offensive linemen can move it back, because I really haven't seen a team with this bad of an inability to score when they get into the red zone. It's almost like kryptonite. You look at Michigan State, and a lot of their scores, if they don't hit the big play because they have them, you just throw your hands up and say, all right, well, you're going to end up – let's just hope you end up kicking a field goal, because I don't have the confidence. Now, they had the bye week. If you're Jonathan Smith with this team, I guess, if you're Jonathan Smith, what are you working on in the bye week?
For me, it would be that offensive line. We've seen they've had a lot of issues, opening up holes for these running backs. And as we saw in the Oregon game, Aiden Childs was under fire that whole game. And we know Iowa's D line is really good. They got after Will Rogers, sacked them 4 times. I think they've had 3 games this year where they've had at least 4 sacks. So I think, that the biggest thing is you got these new players in there, these freshmen that were kind of thrown into the fire. Hopefully with an extra week, you were able to scheme some things up where you can, take advantage of some potential mismatches and not get caught with, a true freshman, on their best defensive lineman. And it becomes, oh man, I missed the block, Child's strip sack. Like those are the kind of things that you want to avoid. So I'm hoping, obviously health, they couldn't really do too much because the guys that they lost are pretty much out for the year. So hopefully they were just able to figure out how to maneuver that offensive line to give Childs more time, whether that's more rollouts, whether that's more other kind of designs that kind of get him on the move and not just have him be stationary, because I think that's a big problem with this line right now.
It is. I mean, you got Iowa, you're going to have a home crowd behind you, but I don't know how long the home crowd sticks with this team. You never want to embarrass yourself on a homecoming weekend because you got a lot of alums up there for their only game. And I do think that if Aiden Childs goes out and turns this ball over early, he's going to hear the boos. He's going to hear it from the people, because I think it's getting to the point of frustration because it's the proverbial 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and then 1 step to the left. And it's just like, okay, son, just go forward. Don't try and be a hero. Protect the ball. Don't throw in the triple coverage. Because then when you see him extend plays with his legs, you're like, yes, that's what you want to see. Next play, fumbles the ball. It's supposedly going to be a pretty nice night, so you don't have to worry about inclement weather or anything like that. But I look at this, and I don't know if this defense has enough to stop Johnson. He's a beast. I mean, do you simply just stack the box and dare Cade to beat you? Because they got a good tight end.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly would. I think if Luke Bechet beats you, so be it. Man, Caleb Johnson's their best player. He's leading the Big Ten in rushing by nearly 200 yards. Like, he's their guy. So if Cade beats me, he throws 3 touchdowns and gets 200-some yards, you tip your cap and you move on. Like, I can't lose knowing Caleb Johnson had 25 carries and he got 150, 175 yards and 2 touchdowns. Like, that's what Iowa wants to do. So I would try to take that away, make them play left-handed and figure it out. Unfortunately, I thought the Michigan State run defense was improved in the first 3 weeks. It looked like it was, and maybe it's part of the wear down effect plus the competition increasing. But against Ohio State, you give up 185 on the ground. Against Oregon, you give up 213. So that run defense, looking a little leaky. But again, those are teams that are much better than Michigan State right now.
And I was about to say, man, you called out 2 top 5 teams
right
in 6 days. And even when the schedule came out, I told people those are 2 automatic L's. The schedule makers did not do you any favors.
Yep.
Because as soon you really had time to heal up from Ohio State, because you had to hurry up, go to practice, and then take an earlier day, play on a Friday instead of a Saturday. So you lost a day of prep. Not an excuse.
And go across country.
Yeah, it's not an excuse. It just is what it is. Sometimes that just is what happens. But yeah, I think that, now you're going to be playing a little bit lesser competition in the next games. Because both the lines, the offensive and defensive line of Oregon, just, they look like the real deal. And you kind of saw it when Ohio State and Oregon played each other, and you're like, you know what? These 2 teams are just built differently. So you'll see. We'll see what the Spartans can do if they stack the box, they stop Caleb Johnson. And I think if you could slow him down and you don't turn the ball over, I think you give yourselves a puncher's chance. I think they're a 6.5 point underdog, home dog. I mean, that's not the same, but I mean, I remember when they went on the road to Maryland, and they were Maryland was favored by 8.5. They found a way to win the game late. They rallied. They made the big time plays. And I would simply say this before we move on: if you're Michigan State, when you get the opportunity for that big time play, for that deep play, for that long play, you have to capitalize. You can't have a penalty. You can't have a drop pass. And yeah, as we said, you got to score. You got to score. You can't just get to the 5 because no Spartan's going to feel good about that at any point. All right. And then
as we saw,
go ahead.
I was going to say, as we saw against the Ohio State game, how many drives did they get into the red zone and then turn it over? They get a big play to Jack Vell and he gets it stripped out, or, they had the big play to Glover and then, Childs gets the ball knocked out, even though they missed the face mask. So, they've had so many drives they've gotten to the 20 and have come away with 0. And that's just not a way to win. And this Iowa game could be low scoring. So points, if you can get 7s, you got to take those and run.
And that's the other thing, real quick. There are two things that happen. They had opportunities to score early in both Ohio State and Oregon, but they failed to do that. It could have been game changing where you forced those teams to kind of relook at this and say, okay, wait a minute. We thought we were going to do this, but now we got to change our game plan. MSU failed both opportunities. Ohio State, I think it was possible that they could have had a 14-3 lead early in the game. Turnover on down, interception, boom, you don't have it. In the Oregon game, you hold them to a 3 and out. You get the ball back. You get the big pass on the 4th down, but you turn the ball over, and after that, the rest was history. But once again, you had an opportunity to jump ahead early, force the other team to change that game plan. For Iowa, if you could jump ahead early, especially if you could go up and kind of take Johnson out the game because now they got to rely on Cade, I think that would help them. So we'll see. The other game, Michigan, Illinois. I don't know what Illinois is. I thought I did. And then the Purdue game, which I think everybody could say probably the worst team in the Big Ten, goes to overtime. And shout out to Purdue for just going for 2, because I would have too. I ain't mad at you. They lose 50-49. What is Illinois? And can Michigan match the success that Purdue had?
Yeah, that game was weird for a variety of reasons. And it looked like Illinois was, going to cruise. I feel like it was a definite look ahead spot because this is supposed to be a huge weekend for them. With Michigan coming to town, it's like the 100-year anniversary of Red Grange, and they're doing this whole big thing at the stadium. And so it looked like Illinois, they went up 27-3 in the third quarter, and they're like, all right, cool, we're good. Let's move on to Michigan, except no one told them Purdue was going to keep playing.
Right.
And then Purdue winds up taking the lead late. And it's like, oh, wait, we got to figure this out. And credit to them, they were able to put a drive together, kick a field goal to send it to overtime, and then, did what they needed to do in OT. But it was weird because that Illinois defense, which was pretty good most of the year, in the second half, they gave up 40. That's just not something you see. You give up 40 and still win the game. Yeah, it's crazy. I don't think Michigan has the weapons that Purdue has on offense, which is really weird to say.
Is it just as simple as Purdue changing quarterbacks?
I think that was part of it. I think he provided a running element that Hudson Card didn't have because he threw for over 200 and ran for over 100. So, he was making a bunch of plays, keeping stuff alive. It was a bunch of 50-50 balls. Receivers were coming down with it, and it just kind of seemed like that snowball effect where Purdue had all of this mojo, Illinois is on their heels trying to figure it out. And, next thing you know, they're in the game and they're like, whoa, this wasn't supposed to happen. And that would have been a damaging loss, an absolutely damaging loss. But kudos to them. They were able to figure it out. But giving up 40 and a half and winning, no Big Ten team's done that in 20 years. So, that was a very, very rare occurrence that you don't want to rely on again.
Yeah. Looking at Michigan, I guess, is it safe to say Tuttle is the guy, or is it going to be a combination? Do they just stick with one QB, or do we see Alex Orji in for some plays? Because once Tuttle came in at Washington, it seemed like Orji just kind of got the pat on the head and said, "Oh, okay, well you can go over there with Davis Warren and you guys can just talk amongst each other because you probably never getting back in the game."
Yeah, it definitely seems like it's Tuttle's job at this point. Now, I don't know, if he has a bad game, he throws a couple picks early. Do they try to make a switch or something like that? That remains to be seen. I do wonder if it makes sense for Orji to kind of be in goal line package stuff. He's a good runner. We've seen them with that flow pass to a receiver or tight end to get touchdowns there. So maybe that's still an option. But when it came to Tuttle, they had Washington off balance. And then once the second half came, it didn't really change much. He was 7 for 14, 50 yards with a pick and a touchdown second half. So it wasn't like he lit the world on fire. This Michigan offense still has had an issue. And in that game alone, we talked about the passes of 5 yards downfield for Orji. As a team, they were only 5 of 15 in that game against Washington. The total was only 5 for 11 on those passes. So it wasn't like a huge improvement.
It just seemed different. But I will say this. When Tuttle was in the game, all of a sudden, Donovan Edwards looked like Donovan Edwards. Donovan Edwards looked like the guy on the cover of the video game. He looked like the guy that everybody thought was going to be the running back, RB1 at Michigan. When Tuttle was in the game, Mullings kind of took that step back. He couldn't run the ball the way he did. It's weird because it's when Orji is in there, you just know they're running the ball, and somehow Mullings is still able to get through and pick up a ton of yards. Was it just me, or was like, when Tuttle came into the game, now all of a sudden you got Edwards coming out the backfield catching? It's like he looked like it rejuvenated his career.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Because I think the knock on Edwards has been, he goes down too easily on contact. And, when Michigan doesn't have an offensive threat, in the passing game, it's like, oh, well, we could put 8 dudes up here, 9 dudes up here, and there's no holes to run through. And you don't have to worry about Mullings, running through contact and all of that. And I think, as we saw in the USC game, like if Mullins is able to break tackles and get through the second level, there's no one else there because everybody's already up at the line. But I think when Tuttle came in, like you said, it was like, okay, maybe we can only put 7 in because they're throwing the ball now. And so now Donovan Edwards has a crease. And we've seen what he could do with a crease. Like, he'll take it to the house. So, yeah, I do think at least them having the threat of a passing game has helped Edwards in the run game. I just don't know how sustainable it is because as we saw in that second half, he didn't really challenge him downfield as much. I think his longest throw in the air was only 18 yards. I don't know if that's a recipe that can continue for you to try to, win 9 or 10 games.
So now I look at, with Illinois, can Michigan's defense, I guess, slow down this Illinois team? Altmaier, I guess, technically dual threat quarterback. I mean, you don't think of like, oh, well, he's this guy and this burner down the field, but he can pick up some yards. He can scramble. He can run some plays. He can call his own number. Michigan defense, to me, is not as strong as I once thought it was, especially the secondary. Will Johnson, he's getting picked on, and he's not really rising to that occasion. The 2D tackles, Graham and Grant, seems like they're not hitting home the way that we thought that they would. Can this defense slow down Illinois?
I think so. I think that's going to be the matchup for that game is that Michigan D-line against that Illinois O-line. The Illinois offensive line is arguably the worst in the league. They're giving up 19 sacks, which is the most in the conference, and they played 6 games while other people have played 7. So they've really struggled to protect Altmaier. So he's needed to be mobile because that line has been breaking down in front of him, and he's had to move around and try to make plays. But if they don't get home, they got 2 really good receivers with Pat Bryant and Zachary Franklin who can get open. And as we saw in the overtime, Bryant gets loose for that touchdown. That's clearly his favorite target. He goes to him whenever they need a play. It's a big third down. It's a red zone opportunity. Like, he's looking Pat Bryant's way, and more often than not, he's come up huge for him. Scored the game winner against Nebraska, scored the game winner against Purdue. So if Michigan could get home, I wouldn't be shocked if they had 4 or 5 sacks. But as we saw, that secondary's got some problems, and Illinois' got 2 receivers that can take advantage of it.
So, yeah, I mean, I didn't know that they gave up that many sacks. So it looks like it should be advantage Michigan in this game on the road, at least defensively. So you're looking at, what, a low-scoring game here?
I wouldn't be shocked if it got high 20s, though, just because I think big plays will happen on both sides. I wouldn't be shocked if, Edwards broke one. I think Altmaier still gets loose because the pressure doesn't get home, or they beat the blitz and Bryant's one-on-one with, someone that's not Will Johnson and he gets a touchdown or something like that. So, I wouldn't be shocked at like a 27-24-ish kind of game.
Okay. All right, man. You got anything else for me?
Well, again, I don't know if we really have too much of them the next couple of weeks, but as we saw, this travel thing's a problem. This West Coast travel thing is a problem. Multiple time zones in the Big Ten. Teams that are doing them are 3-10. I don't think there hasn't been a team that's gone from west to east and won a game yet. We've seen teams go east to west and win, but we haven't seen one go from west to east and win yet. So I think we only got UCLA and Rutgers with that, but curious just to kind of see what that looks like going forward.
Well, yeah, that'd be trying to think. That'd be Michigan. Oregon, Michigan. Yeah, coming up. Oregon coming out to the big house. So okay, all right. We will. We'll see how that goes, man. Harold, I appreciate you taking the time to come on. We're doing it a little bit earlier this week, but hey, be back for a breakdown. I'll do one breakdown of the winners and losers this upcoming weekend. But for now, for Rico Beard, that's Harold Sheldon. Thanks for watching the 5 Star Zone. We'll be back later on in the week. See you guys.